You ever notice there's just something different about people who grew up in the 1970s? There's a certain way they think, a way they tackle problems that feels, well, unique. In this explainer, we're going to dig into the psychology of this generation, one that was shaped by a world that looks almost nothing like the one we live in today. Okay, so let's jump right in. The source material we're looking at today kicks off with this really fascinating idea that growing up in the 70s created a mindset so distinct, it's almost alien to younger generations. So what is it? What makes this way of thinking so hard to explain? Well, let's try and figure it out together. We're talking about a group of people who were really shaped by things like silence, freedom, and a kind of raw, unfiltered reality. You got to remember, they were the last generation to live out their childhood before the digital revolution came along and, well, changed literally everything. So where does this all come from? The source points to one place above all else, their childhood. And specifically, the fact that for the most part, there were no adults watching over them. Just try to imagine this. You left the house in the morning, and for hours, maybe all day, no one knew exactly where you were. There was no way to call, no way to text. You were just out there. And forget about Google Maps. There is no little blue dot in your pocket to tell you where to go. If you got lost, you had to figure out how to get back on your own. You had your bike, maybe a couple of friends, and that's about it. You'd think that with all this freedom, there'd be a giant, complicated list of rules, right? Nope. For most kids, their entire day-to-day life was governed by one single overarching principle. That was it. That was the deal. As long as you were back before the streetlights flickered on, you were pretty much good to go. And this wasn't neglect, you know? It was this unspoken trust, an expectation that you could and would handle yourself. So what's the psychological effect of all that freedom? Well, it builds this deep, instinctual confidence. It's that little voice inside that, when you're faced with a problem, just says, I'll figure it out, even when you have no idea what you're doing. It became this core belief in their own ability to navigate the world. But that self-reliance wasn't just built out of freedom, it was also forged in silence. To really get this mindset, you have to look at the generation that raised them. Their parents were, for the most part, survivors. Many of them had lived through the Great Depression or World War II. They had seen real hardship. And because of that, they were incredibly stoic. They didn't complain, they didn't talk a lot about their feelings, they just quietly carried the weight of it all. And that's what they passed down to their kids, not through lectures, but just by being. Kids absorbed this survival mindset like it was in the air. The idea that life is tough, problems are gonna happen, and you just adapt, you endure, and you get on with it. And that attitude flows right into our next point. Responsibility wasn't some abstract concept or a chore your parents gave you. It was just a fundamental part of life. It was something you breathed at home. You didn't learn this stuff in a classroom. You learned it by doing. You helped around the house because help was needed. Simple as that. If something broke, you didn't just go buy a new one. You learned how to fix it. The expectation was always the same. Figure it out. And this all leads to a really powerful idea. This generation didn't grow up thinking, oh, someone will come help me. No. They learned from a very young age that if you need help, the first person you look to is yourself. You were the first responder for your own problems. Okay, so here's where the story takes a massive turn. The world that forged the 70s generation is just fundamentally different from the world that has shaped everyone born after the year 2000. It's really a tale of two completely different realities. I mean, the contrast is just stark. The 70s generation grew up in a world where information was scarce. You had to go look for it. Today, we live in a world where it's infinite and it finds you. Their minds had quiet moments, time for boredom and rest. Today, our minds are always on, always processing. That, right there, is the great digital divide. And according to the source material, this constant digital buzz has a profound psychological cost. The argument is that while the post-2000s generation is incredibly smart and creative, they're also navigating a level of mental exhaustion their predecessors never had to face. It's like trying to survive in a world that's moving too fast for the human brain to really keep up. So this brings us to a really interesting, almost poetic idea about the 70s generation. They aren't just a product of the past. They're this unique link, a bridge between two completely different eras of human experience. Think about it. They are the last to truly remember what life was like before the internet, before smartphones, before all the constant noise. They have one foot in that slow, raw, analog world, and the other foot planted firmly in our fast, loud, digital one. And that gives them a perspective that no one else really has. And if there's one single idea that kind of sums up their whole story, it's this: their resilience, their self-reliance, their quiet confidence. It wasn't given to them in a classroom. It was forged in the unsupervised, unfiltered, and often challenging reality of just being a kid back then. So we'll end by turning the source material's final question back to you. One generation had all the physical freedom in the world, but often lived in an emotional silence. The other has infinite connection, but deals with constant mental overstimulation. Which world do you think was harder to navigate? It's a fascinating question, and one